Is 6:01 and I will be calling the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Garza,
Present.
Armstrong,
Present.
Orgish.
Present.
All right, we have established a quorum. We will be considering the approval of the Kyle Housing Authority September 24th regular meeting minutes. Any discussion? Great. Can I get a move to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Meeting minutes have been approved. We'll move on to item number 3, citizen comment period with the Kyle Housing Authority. The Kyle Housing Authority welcomes comments from citizens early in the agenda of regular meetings. Speakers are provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other matter concerning housing authority business, and they must observe the 3-minute time limit. Do I have any citizen comments? Seeing none, I will be closing the comment period. Moving on to number 4, staff reports and presentations. Item number 2, receiving a report, hold a discussion, provide staff feedback regarding the executive director's report. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, y'all.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Here we are.
Here we are again. Okay. So a couple of things that we want to talk about. Fiscal update, pending administrative items, establishment of the resident council, and then items for future meetings. So we, Housing Authority of the City of Austin and Kyle Housing Authority staff have been reviewing the accounts and the backup. For today, we will have a more detailed conversation in a future item where we will go over the budget and revenue and have you actually take action on approving the operating budgets for Pete Dressen and for Charles Young. So that is an action item for today that we will go through. Just to kind of remind us on Opal Point, since it's not quite the same as the other two animals, right? The intent is for the Kyle Housing Authority to receive an annual lease payment of 25% of the property tax exemption. We anticipate the tax savings of $955,000 in year 1, and that would equate to a payment of $238,777 in year 2, and we would anticipate receiving that in December of 2025. To our knowledge, that is still on track. Okay. We're working with Stryker Partners or Properties, which is our partner, and Sunbridge, which is their property manager, on that structure and operational issues. We had a tour that was scheduled with them for earlier this month, and the person that we were actually going to be touring with was in a car accident, and we had to push that. So that is later on, I believe. I don't remember. Gosh, it's not this week, so we'll say that. And then I've been working with Darren Smith with Oxano Development on the compliance reporting and monitoring. We've received the first quarterly report that they've submitted. We don't have any substantial concerns, but we are looking with them at how they're doing the income qualification and reviewing the financials to ensure that all the fees are being appropriately escrowed so we can receive that payment that we talked about before. And then reviewing the marketing and ensuring that our affordable units are being filled and that they are reviewing the applications and the profiles of the files for people that are in those affordable units accordingly. So all of that's going along as expected. And hopefully we should see that $238,000 here in December of this year. So some of the pending administrative items that we've been tracking, we'll talk about as the next item, updating our bylaws. We've got a procurement policy that is still needing to be created. Nope. What happened to my presentation? There we go. Yeah, that's good. We do have some documentation about the procurement levels and whatnot in the bylaws for us to talk through and to get some general thoughts on. The capital improvement plan, that will be part of the item that we're going to be looking at for the individual budgets of Pete Dressen and Charles Young. And then property regulations, we have an action item today to authorize expenditure of the funds to receive or to acquire the admissions and continued occupancy policy for Charles Young. Pete Dressen has current policies, but we do need to update the policies for Charles Young, and so that's an action item that is later on in the agenda. And then some just general announcements. I wanted to check in on the training. I have one that is fully complete. Good job. Yes, you get a gold star. But we have extended the time frame to get those done. We really do need to get the 2 trainings done that we talked about at the previous meeting. If you have any trouble logging in or getting access to those, then please do reach out to me and I will make sure. But you're looking for emails from Ms. Taboada in your email. And from me probably. And then I wanted to have some time just to have a discussion with you about your tours. I know you all went and did tours of the property, so if you wanted to have some open forum conversation about that with your colleagues, this is your posted item to allow you to have open conversation about that with your colleagues.
Great.
Discuss.
Excellent. I'll go first.
And there's Felicia.
Speak of. I'll let her come in and that way she can hear too.
Our door unlocking does not cooperate with us.
Hi, Talicia. All right, Talicia, we are just talking about our tours. We're talking about our tours to the properties, so just in time to hear. Yeah, so I visited Young first. The biggest notes that I took are that not all the units have storage units, so possibly looking at trying to get that for every person, or every unit, I guess. And then one of the biggest concerns, too, that I noticed were that some of them had to have their dryer in the living room, with the vent literally just like sticking out a window. And then the washer is in the kitchen. So I don't know how that ended up being as such.
Yeah, that probably is 100% retrofit and trying to find a way to problem solve into having those units inside the facility.
Yeah. So I don't know if that would be a long-term thing to maybe look into at all, but I visited a unit that someone was literally just moving in as we got there, and that took up kind of a big chunk of their living room. It's not a huge space, so then trying to figure out how to fit a dryer in there and having a window open during any time of the year was maybe a little bit of a concern for myself, and especially as a parent, knowing that I would then have to monitor that with children around. So
Yeah.
and then also many of the units need new appliances, which I think is something that several tenants had expressed. And then she also mentioned that maintenance tools, they used to have, I guess, a storage shed that had a bunch of maintenance tools in it. And when the previous management company left, they took everything with them. So they've been buying as needed. So I don't know how they need to go about requesting purchasing for that. She said they're just doing it as an on-needed basis. So
And when you say tools, do you mean like?
any sort of maintenance, like lawnmowers or plumbing equipment or anything like that. She said that they've just been kind of buying as needed or replacing as needed. So, and then for Pete Dressen, each of them has a storage unit, which is awesome. They don't have a maintenance person, just a temporary one for now. So she said that they do need to look at hiring someone. And then they've been provided bids for new windows and AC units, but she's not sure where those went. And then laundry lines, since none of them have a dryer, they use laundry lines to dry everything, but the laundry lines are not well kept. So looking at something for that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about all I had for my notes. Otherwise, I mean, it was really nice to see the properties, and it was nice to see at Dressen, the roofing and stuff that they have been working on. Get to see good progress there.
And we'll also have an update about that capital project
Great.
with Mr. Roth.
But yeah, it sounded really sweet. They also mentioned that they did a community event and the residents have expressed that they would really like to be able to do that again. They had like a barbecue at each of the properties and that everyone came out, they brought their chairs. A lot of residents have been there long-term, so they all know each other already. But doing something like that, someone had talked about maybe doing a patio decorating contest for holiday season, maybe having some sort of gift card prizes, something like that. Just things to make it feel more
Well, conveniently,
community-driven.
talking about the resident council is the next thing we're going to talk about. So
Indeed.
indeed.
But yeah, it was good.
So I agree. A lot of stuff needs to be updated out there. Some stuff is already getting updated. I wasn't able to go inside any of the units for both properties. So my knowledge is just based off of the outside. So with the tools, she did mention that the person who was there took all the tools, and so they kind of have to start over again. And so that was one thing that they were asking for, was more tools to keep in their shed. In the event somebody ends up leaving, they don't want that person to take all their tools and then they'd be left with none. The other thing that we were looking at was just the space around both properties to see where maybe a small playground could go in. And so we're asking different, I wouldn't say they're kind of like playground companies, to see if there's anything where maybe another park comes out and reaches to them and says, we want you to rebuild this park for us, and whatever's left over you can trash. Well, that might not be so much trash to someone else. It might be something that we can salvage and make our own, but put them in these spots where both properties had an area where there was a spot to put a playground. But at the resident meeting that we had a couple months ago, that was one thing that they wanted, was the playgrounds. And I agree. Like, I was walking the distance of the playground that they go to right now with the, I think it's the Charles Young one. And it's kind of far for kids to be walking all the way out there, especially, I've seen little kids like 4 years old walking with their brothers and sisters, but I feel like they shouldn't have to walk to someone else's playground to use it. They can have one. There's space, especially back in the units. There's a huge area that's not being used at all. So in the meantime, trying to find playgrounds that we can salvage to probably put into these properties in the future is something that I think I'd love to do.
That was kind of my biggest takeaway too, is that both of the communities, they're very well kept and they're very quiet, but they are a little bit away from the community, and there's not, sidewalks in Guile, or we don't have that many of them, so the accessibility isn't there. So providing some of that park opportunity there, so they don't have to go walk into unsafe spaces in some cases to get to parks. Also, I think it was Pete Dressen with the big backyard. I know we have we had that community garden. Like, how do we do outreach to some of these other groups we have within the city to partner with doing community garden or repurposing playground equipment? Because I know we've just had some updates at Steeplechase and Waterloo. Like, how do we use what we have at our disposal to include them more into the community by including, having parks or a garden or just things like that. So that was my biggest takeaway too, was just bringing them more into the community.
And again, timely conversations. I think I've been having some conversations with the Parks Department, and we'll talk about that as a future item update, where they're giving some thought to that exact question.
And then the other, I think at Pete Dressen as well, I think with their laundry situation, like you mentioned there, again, the accessibility, so I don't know if they don't have a vehicle, how do they have access for laundry? So just something to take in consideration too, like how do we make that more available to the folks in the community that may not have access via vehicle to do their laundry?
Yep. All good comments. We're taking notes. Anything else on that? Okay. this has been very helpful. We really appreciate our partners at AMP facilitating that. We'll talk a little bit more as we get into some of the conversations about capital expenditures and how we want to develop our capital plan in the future agenda item later today in this meeting. So thank you for sharing your thoughts there. We did want to make sure, now that we're kind of talking about maybe the end of this federal shutdown-ish thing, maybe. We're hopeful. We continue to do as much as we can within the confines of the shutdown. There are going to be some things that we're going to have to catch up on processing-wise within HUD systems. I have been contacted by the attorney that's working on the Franconia claim that is also being impacted by the shutdown and being able to get that processed. We are still seeing lags in our transition from MDP to HACA, especially on the Pete Dressen side. Because a lot of that requires intervention from our friends at the federal government. So as soon as we get folks back to work, we hope to see some things start moving on that. But perhaps more important is the fact and recognition and cognition of the fact that a lot of our residents have effectively lost their SNAP benefits. So we're really hopeful that the shutdown does in fact stop being shut down, if that's the way to say that. We're all ready for this to be over so we can ensure that our residents and our properties are not affected any more than they need to be.
Question
Sure.
about the federal shutdown with Opal Point. Do we know if they did any accommodation to federal employees?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Could we ask?
I'm happy to ask.
Okay, thanks.
With the SNAP benefits being delayed, if we continue to see that the government is shut down, is there anything that we can do right now to bring in like maybe a temporary food pantry or something on site so residents aren't trying to hustle around the city picking up items?
Yeah, at a cost.
If we were to find someone to do that at no cost, because I know that there are a lot of people in the Kyle Beauty Moms group especially that have offered, like, tell us if you need anything, let us know if you need anything. And I did it for my kids' school, and they came through with hundreds of dollars worth of snacks and stuff like that. So
I
Are
don't
we
see any
able to
reason
do
why we
that?
couldn't have that happen, and that wouldn't require any separate activity by the board. I think that's something that you guys can just work on individually.
okay, perfect. I
Yeah.
think we'll talk after the meeting maybe. Okay.
Okay.
If we work on it by chance, we need to make sure we don't have a quorum.
That is right.
Right.
So 2 of the 3 of you could work on that, but the 3 of you cannot all work on that together.
Okay.
Or at separate times.
Yes, just not on the same communication thread, and avoid a walking quorum, and don't get me in trouble with my friend Amy Alcorn Reed over there, because that's not what I want.
Okay,
Okay?
thanks.
So let's spend just a little bit of time talking about a resident council. So this is something that we have not seen with the Kyle Housing Authority before, or up to this point, to my knowledge. I mean, Talicia will correct me if I'm wrong. Resident councils are designed to be a bridge between management and residents, ensuring that the voices of tenants are being heard and incorporated into our housing authority decisions, while fostering accountability and empowerment and community well-being. Serving as an official representative body for residents in a public housing development or group of developments, where the resident council will promote resident participation in decision-making, management, and operations, improving quality of life, resident satisfaction, and community safety, and acting as a liaison formally between the residents and the housing authority to ensure open communications. Core responsibilities: advising and consulting with housing authority on policies, modernization, maintenance, and resident services, planning activities, encouraging resident involvement in programs related to education, employment, self-sufficiency, and safety. That would be idealized in big housing authorities. I think for housing authorities our size, then we're looking more for community and building that community. Monitoring and relaying resident concerns, including maintenance, safety, and management issues, and organizing community activities to promote engagement and resident leadership. So as far as requirements and representation, governance, they must be democratically elected by residents 18 years or older whose names appear on the lease. They operate under written bylaws or a constitution, which will include procedures for elections and recalls and membership. Represents the interests of all residents, not only those active in council activities, and they must hold regular meetings open to residents and maintain transparent communication. Housing Authority and Resident Council are expected to maintain working partnership, likely formalizing it through something like a memorandum of understanding. Housing Authority must provide reasonable support, including meeting space, technical assistance, and tenant participation funds. And then the councils can help the Housing Authority achieve stronger resident engagement and compliance with HUD's tenant participation requirements. These are typically funded, from what we have seen, with HUD regulations providing the requirement for tenant participation funds with up to $25 per unit per year over both properties. That is structured into the budget that you're going to see from Mr. Roth here in a little bit. Funds can be used for training, community events, communications, and resident leadership development. What I'm kind of thinking, and this is obviously something that we're here to talk about today, is that we would have a single resident council over both properties, which has representation from both properties. I'm thinking that the resident council, it makes sense that it would consist of 5 seats, that each property would have 2 representatives that are elected from the property, and then you would, from each property, right? And then you would have the president that would be elected from both properties, if that makes sense. And then once they're convened, that we would ask the resident council to determine a role of vice president and then of secretary treasurer. So that would allow them to figure out their own leadership aside from the president role, which would be elected over both of the properties. I'm thinking at 51 units total, we want to have a single resident council. The funds would have to remain bifurcated, right? Because the Pete Dressen funds need to be used for Pete Dressen related activities and vice versa, because they're 2 different programs, right? 2 different properties. But still to have a single group to help ensure that we have some unity there. This should not necessarily be confused with the role of the resident member on the board, right? Your resident council, your resident, we have 2 vacant Housing Authority board seats. They're both mayoral appointees. We can have 1 more general at-large individual that the future mayor would appoint, and then 1 that would be a representative of a current resident on from one of the properties. It does not have to be someone who is on the resident council, though. So let's just making it. It's not like the president automatically serves on the board. This is that board seat remains a mayoral appointee. Okay.
And can it be someone that's on the?
It could be.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be, and there's no requirement to make it that. Okay. That makes sense. So if all of this sounds kind of reasonable, then we will start working on how we can roll this out. We would start working on some bylaws and probably bring that for you guys to consider at the January meeting. We'll have to think about how we're going to market this as a new thing that is going to be existing within the Kyle Housing Authority with our tenants and residents, and we don't want to rush into things without having the opportunity to think that fully through. So this gives us a little bit of time to kind of pull together a plan and some potential bylaws and bring that forward to talk about in January, if that sounds good for you guys.
So that's roughly getting 7 people to volunteer, right?
5.
But isn't the treasurer and the?
They're same thing.
Okay.
So we would say Pete Dressen elect 2 people.
Okay.
Charles Young elect 2 people. Everybody select a president that gets elected from both properties. And then once they're all together, they would pick between the 2 properties, or those 5 people, they would self-appoint a treasurer and a secretary treasurer and a vice president.
Okay. So 10% of the units.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Right? But, it's a way to get people engaged. So, I mean, we can scale it back. We can have only 3. We can have, I wouldn't recommend an even number, because then you can't vote on things, because if you disagree, then there is no tiebreaker.
Do we
So,
have,
I mean, we're just spitballing on what might be a good way to set this up. So that's what I came up with through my research and talking to my friend, Mr. Roth.
do we have any interest from residents?
I don't know that there's been any conversation with him.
Okay.
I think there hasn't been, right? Because this is something that housing authorities are supposed to have, but we have not had one yet. So I think this is going to be a new. So in that respect, it might be better to start smaller, and just do one from each, and then a president elected from both. Or we can do a general election. I mean, we have the ability to make this what we think makes the most sense. Just offering some things to talk about, so that we can decide what makes sense for our organization, and then put some pen to paper.
Is there a reason that we're not including Opal Point? Just because it's a different program?
It's a different program.
Gotcha.
It's not governed by, and I wouldn't recommend mixing those particular properties. It's not governed by the federal government in the same way that these programs are.
Okay, perfect.
I think 5's a good number as a goal, and if we can't do 5, depending on volunteering, because we might be asking during the holiday season, do 3.
Well, we wouldn't be asking for, we would be first deciding on what we want the structure to look like and what the bylaws are and what kind of the plan is. So we're not gonna, that's another reason why we're not talking about bringing this forward in December.
Got you. Okay.
We're gonna be bringing this forward in January for you guys to kind of noodle on and vote on and comment on, and then we will be rolling out that plan through the spring.
Okay.
Is that something we could get some feelers put out too of interest? Is it, do we want to put feelers out to the community?
I would say let us get a little bit of structure to it, so
Okay.
I would hate to say, come volunteer for this thing and run for this thing when I don't have any
Okay.
parameters to be able to say other than that. Because it is a requirement from the federal government, we want to make sure that what we're doing is in compliance with that, and that we do know what their purview is going to be and what their budgets are going to be and what we're going to be asking them to do. So it feels
That's big.
Yeah.
better to know a little bit more before we really start talking about it with the residents.
Yeah.
So maybe
But if you
say-
guys are okay with this, we'll structure it like I've laid it out, knowing that we can easily scale it back as we get more in. And I don't know, I might decide to say only 3 as I'm writing everything out. But we'll see what makes sense as we start trying to put a pen to paper to create the bylaws and MOU and all the stuff that would go for the resident council.
Maybe we could put something like no less than 3, no more than 5 in the bylaws or something.
We can, but what we write is what we're going to be holding elections for. And so the other thing that I want to make sure that we've got appropriate balance between the 2 properties, and that we,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
structure that the
Okay.
right way. So we can, I would say, starting with 3 and then looking to grow might be better if we're worried about participation levels.
Sounds good. Do we need to make a vote or anything on this, or just say,
No.
yep, that sounds great, good job, keep going?
Yeah, that.
Thanks, Rosie.
Okay, we'll keep going. So just to kind of give a preview of the next 2 meetings that we're thinking, these are things that we have in the works that we'll be bringing to you from a briefing perspective. Housing Works is going to be coming to our December 17th meeting to do that next step of engagement around the housing plan that we're working on. We're briefing for those of you that are really excited about all this stuff. They're going to come talk to council on December 2nd. Just to kind of do a little check-in to talk about where we're at and the fact that we're kind of moving out of the quantitative stage of the housing assessment and moving into the qualitative, which is going to be doing things like coming and talking to you guys and some of the other boards and commissions we have, and doing some community meetings. So that will be kicking off. I've also talked to our Parks Department about looking at the parks, just doing an assessment of where our 2 properties are, what they have around, how close things are, I specifically now we'll be talking to them about the idea of reuse of equipment or anything that they can come up with to help us if they come back and say that these are really parks deficient, or they would consider it not to be walkable, or what we can do as in the form of participation. So that'll be our Parks and Recreation staff. And then based on conversations tonight, as we go through and talk about the budgets, we'll be coming forward with a capital plan to help understand where, we know we have needs at these properties. And so we're going to have to make some decisions about how we're going to expend the funds we have from the federal government through our regular housing program funds for capital. And then as we look at the influx of cash associated with the Franconia claim and from Opal Point, what improvements we might want to do and how we would want to prioritize things. So that'll be a conversation for the December 17th meeting, and potentially taking action on the bylaws, assuming we get to a point through conversations later today. Then at January.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, this is in regards to capital planning. For if we get new, I'm trying to blank the word, dishwashers and things at the complexes, appliances. Thank you. Are we held, since we're working through HUD, are we held to go through federal rates for that? To buy
How we source them?
Yeah, because it.
Yeah, we would have to comply with federal procurement requirements.
Okay, got it.
But that's just getting pricing estimates and I mean it's not out of the realm of reasonable.
Okay, cool. Well, I only ask that 'cause sometimes federal stuff can be more expensive.
The cost of,
Than non-
I mean, going through a bidding process in general for public procurement is sometimes more expensive.
Okay.
But we would be selecting based on the lowest price that we find.
Okay.
So it takes effort and it takes process, and that's what leads to the expense
Okay, got it. Thank you.
from a lot of years of doing public procurement. So things that we have kind of in the burner for January 28th, talking more about the resident council, talking about that, the ACOP, the admissions, or what is the A? Did I get it right? Admissions and Continued Occupancy Plan for Charles Young, capital plan, again, because there'll be multiple conversations that we'll have to have about that. Looking at firming up our procurement policy, and then starting to have conversations about the management company, right? And that is it for my item number 1.
Excellent. Thank you
Questions?
so much. Any questions? Nope.
Okay,
Moving on to item number
3. Sorry, that was item
Yes.
number 2.
Got it. Receive a report, hold a discussion, provide staff feedback regarding proposed Housing Authority Board bylaw revisions. Take it away, Ms. Trulove.
Okay, this is where it's gonna get messy. I'll try pulling this up on my computer. While they're pulling the presentation up. Okay, so we wanted to just have a general conversation about our bylaws. They've been in place, from what we can tell, since 2015, but they are outdated. So what I thought, I mean, we could take this any number of ways based on the will of you guys. We've looked at our current bylaws a couple of times in a couple of different meetings. I asked our new assistant city attorney to propose some bylaws for us just based on what she could review from other jurisdictions. And so I have a proposal that we can talk through. What would be the desire of the group? Do you need to refresh yourself on current bylaws? Do we want to just jump into new bylaws? Do we want to not say bylaws anymore this meeting?
$1 for every time. I've looked over both of them, so I'm okay moving forward
into the
over the
proposed
current
bylaws?
and proposed. I already have some questions, so.
Okay, friends in the back, is it possible to click on the link that says proposed bylaws to pull up that document? Maybe?
Oh, I see it happening, I think.
Oh, look, it's happening. It's happening. It's very exciting. Okay. These are perhaps a little more robust than we need. There's already things in here that I think are maybe not as necessary for us. But starting with this is when I wish I had a mouse or a cursor that I could make this work. Oh, it's moving around on the screen. Okay, there it goes over there. So close. I really appreciate my friends in the back because they're helping me. I'm going to pull them up on my computer screen so that I can see them and scroll myself. Okay, so starts with our overall objective. Then it moves into really some discussion of the Board of Commissioners, talking about the role of the commissioners, board composition, members, officers, chairperson, vice chairperson, secretary, the executive director role, and then additional duties and additional personnel. Does anyone have any questions on? I think this all feels pretty clear to me on what we're looking at for these. Just kind of definitions and really carrying everyone forward, or the roles and responsibilities forward as they've existed or as we know them to exist right now.
I did have
Yes,
a
please.
question. So with it saying that we have a board of 5 members,
Mm-hmm.
if we were to approve this, we would be out of that compliance already since there's only 3 of us.
That is the maximum. That it doesn't. This is not intended to. Your commission right now size is supposed to be 5. So just because we don't have 2 that are appointed doesn't mean that you're out of compliance. It just means that it takes all 3 of you to have a meeting, which is not any different than what we have right now.
Okay,
If that makes
I just want to
sense.
make sure that we're
Yeah.
like following all of the things legally. Okay, perfect.
We want to be legal. That makes us happy.
Yes. And then the other question I had was about I think this is still in there, about only the mayor is allowed to
Yes.
terminate commissioners.
You are all mayoral appointees, and that is something that is true across housing authorities.
Okay. And then they're the only ones, and they are able to remove commissioners at any time. Okay.
Correct.
Is there any sort of definition for I think it said like dereliction of duty or something like that. Is there a definition for that?
Or is that a term of art that is fine to just be in there as dereliction of duty? Do we need to define that, Amy?
So state law pretty thoroughly defines when the mayor can and cannot remove commissioners, and so that's something we could go in and maybe just reference straight to the law.
Okay. I just like to cover all of the
Yeah.
things.
I don't know that we need to be that specific in here
I've sat through some
because
very detailed parliamentary meetings, so I have learned to be very detailed on
we
bylaws.
appreciate the attention to detail.
If you think it's fine, that's fine. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
going to be
think
picky.
it's fine.
I'll look at it. We may just straight reference state law there instead
Yeah.
of getting into the
Perfect.
details.
Okay, that's fine.
Perfect. Just wanted to double check. And then it said secretary is the executive director. Does that make, since you're the executive director, you're also a secretary?
But I employ the help of my friend Debbie over here.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's just like the 0.2,
Yes.
2.0.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Those are the only questions I had, so I thought I would ask since we're here.
In the additional personnel section, it talks about the fact that we can bring in additional staff. The Board of Commissioners by resolution can designate a depository or banks for our funds. We've done that. You guys select yourselves for chair and vice chair. If the chair leaves, then we figure that out. All of that seems pretty good.
Can I ask a question under 2.01, and this just could be like nomenclature or nuanced. We engage with community improvement organizations. does that really paint a clear picture that we could work with the developer? Like we have with Opal Point?
Well,
We drag up to 2.01.
can you drag up, friend? Go up, 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 other direction. There we go. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
It's kind of generic language, but
Right there. Thank you. It's in the overall purpose section.
Yeah, the purpose is generally just kind of a guiding provision. If we're more comfortable with other language, we can definitely look at that. Or if you want me to propose something else, we can do that.
I'm only saying just because like I'm getting more informed on how we get into partnerships with some of these developers and it's beneficial to them. So I don't know if that paints a clear picture or if we need to do that under purpose, right? Because they're not an organization.
Yeah, I think I would also add something in there about working with the city as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Okay, we'll look at that.
Mainly, I just want, if anyone looks at this, it's a clear picture of who we can work with when we're working to find alternatives to provide affordable housing. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. In the whole document or just up to this point?
Just up to that point.
Okay, but that's like the first section. Okay. I'm going to keep scrolling. I'm going to scroll down to, we've kind of gone through Article 3. We've gone through Article 3. So now we're in Article 4. Any other questions on Article 3? Let me get us slightly more organized here. Any other questions on Article 3? No? Fiona? Okay. Article 4 speaks to meetings. It talks about the fact that we're going to have an annual meeting held in July. We're going to hold more regular meetings than that. And so it talks about, but the primary requirement is that you hold that annual meeting. So if nothing else, we have to hold that annual meeting. But we have set meetings. This says that you guys are going to meet at least quarterly. We're meeting more like monthly. So I think that's appropriate for where we're at and what we need to do and how we're accomplishing business right now. And at any point, we can do special meetings. This lays out procedures for how we would do special meetings and emergency meetings. And that we're going to be complying with the Texas Open Meetings Act, which I think is good. And that quorum is a majority of the commissioners. And at the meetings, the secretary shall determine order of business, but generally will consist of what we've seen, right? Any questions or concerns, and then how we're going to vote? Aye and nay. Questions, concerns about the section of meetings? No proxies? All good? Moving on to Article 5, Executive Committee. This is where I feel like we're starting to get into the committee concept. This may not be necessary for us right now. We may elect to just cut some of this to simplify. It may make sense to have this here but not be utilizing this right now. But when we look at housing authorities across the state and across the land, you do see more of this kind of stuff. But again, with the number of properties that we have and the number of units we have, I don't know how relevant it's going to be, but I will present it anyway.
One option here would be to make it permissive. So
Yeah.
the Board of Commissioners may designate an executive committee, and then if designated, the committee shall determine the agenda.
Yeah, I actually like that. She's good. Thank you, Amy. It's like she's a lawyer. But, with that, then I actually am really comfortable with all of these that we may elect to have an executive committee. And if we do, it shall be this. And we may elect to have standing committees. And if we do, they shall be these. Again, I'm not really sure we have a whole lot in this effort, especially right now, and especially with just the three of you being our the body, right? But that's what we have in front of us right now. You guys you're like all of the committees. That's fantastic. You should do that. Okay, making a note of permissive committees. And then we get into our procurement aspect. No conflicts of interest, no gratuities or kickbacks. This is where we might talk about whether these amounts are reasonable, right? Again, we're just talking about things. None of this was really papered before, and so it's hard to know how things have been operating. So what we're looking at, or what we have in front of us, is that the executive director is authorized to buy things, for lack of a better way of talking about it, for up to $3,000 for a specific purchase without prior board approval. Paying earnest money, paying for goods and services procured under contracts in accordance with the terms of the contracts, and then make payments on invoices relating to the filing and prosecution of tax lawsuits. That sounds really fancy. But basically, it allows me to have more or less an administrative authority up to $3,000. So like the ACOP item that you would see later tonight on the agenda, I would have been able to just do that. I think 3,000 might be a little low. That's what Michael and I have talked about. I don't know, 10,000, if that's more. I don't remember what you and I talked about as being a more.
The concern is that a single item can easily be more than $3,000, and do we want to wait a month to get board approval?
Yeah.
At which point in time the price may go up.
Yeah.
Especially if it's an item that is within the budget, or the budgeted item, which the board is already approving and planning for. I think there may be a space for some, a little bit higher number and a little bit more of an opportunity for the executive director.
So for context, 3,000 is a number that governmental entities often pick because under Chapter 252 of the Local Government Code, for procurement purposes, anything over $3,000, you have to search for like a hub vendor or some other
It's one of
vendor.
the state purchasing thresholds.
So it's
that
a
exist.
pretty common use. I don't know how much that specifically applies to the housing authority because you're not a city, you're not a county, and that's generally the entities that follow that chapter. You'll see other standard ones are much higher. I think for purposes of this entity, 10,000 makes a lot of sense as long as it's budgeted, but it's kind of up to you guys.
And I unfortunately don't have enough experience yet with what kind of expenses we're going to see to know what is reasonable. So I'm kind of shot in the darking as well for what would be appropriate.
And I think we have somewhere in here as well about being able to call an emergency meeting. So if it is something that comes up, like one of the buildings caught on fire and we need to work on procurements and things like that right away, whatever it looks like, then we can easily call an emergency meeting to maybe cover that. But again, this is shot in the dark, I think, for all of us. So I'll rely on the expertise of other people.
So go ahead.
Pardon my ignorance here. If it's already being budgeted, would you need prior approval if we budgeted it in the first place?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if it exceeds the amount that I am allowed to, think of it as like, what am I allowed to swipe my credit card for, right? If my limit is 3,000 and I want to buy, even if it's budgeted, I need to buy 2 new AC units and those are going to be $5,000, then that's something that I would have to come to the board under the terms of this. I would need to come to the board to get approval to swipe the credit card, the company credit card, for $5,000 as opposed to $3,000.
Okay. That makes,
Again, I feel like 3 is a little low, but I don't really know what I don't really know what it should. I mean, I'll This is just for discussion purposes, and so we'll think about a number between that we would put in there for actual adoption, and maybe we'll have a better idea come December what that looks like. But it's somewhere in the neighborhood. To me, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 10 that would be appropriate, and I'm not sure where I land on that yet.
And just some context, governments, we typically don't budget individual purchases. So we're not gonna budget, hey, I have to buy an AC unit for this unit, and an AC unit for this unit, and an AC unit. We're gonna budget $50,000 for AC units this year. And that's why we then have to bring it back if we're gonna purchase, because we're not gonna do it all at once.
And then once you get into higher dollar thresholds, like where it talks about in the methods of procurement, under 50, over 50, we start talking about different, we have different requirements that we have to go through for getting bids. So really the first piece is, to me, more of like the spot purchase. I need to do a thing. And so maybe 3,000 is appropriate, because maybe anything above that would really theoretically should be something that we're doing some kind of procurement process about. So we're still kind of thinking through what makes sense here. And then you see in the methods of procurement, this has got the $50,000 threshold. And then as I'm talking about this right now, I'm looking at Amy, because that just went up to $100,000 for cities. And so I don't know if that applies to $100,000 for our
Texas local
agency.
government code did just go up to $100,000. I would have to go look at it myself to see exactly how much of the Texas local government code, specifically Chapter 252, applies to housing authorities versus federal requirements
Yeah.
because of the federal funding. But for purposes of cities, yes. And I think one other thing with housing authorities is, even if it doesn't apply, you guys are created by cities, and so we're used to talking in city language, and our city language is $50,000, which just went up to $100,000 and $3,000. So that's kind of how these numbers show up.
That's where they came from. But we'll look at that a little bit more. I'll be curious if how that new change in Texas law gets interpreted from some of our peer organizations. But we'll try to get some answers around that. But that competitive threshold is the difference between just getting simple quotes and doing a formal invitation for bid process, right? And that, I mean, the bigger the dollars, the more serious we would want to have our estimations and our pricing and our contracts. So that would be a change for this organization based on how things have been done previously. So we will kind of do a little bit more noodling on the procurement method section just to make sure we have the right dollar amounts in there. But the idea is that we have a line, and when it's above that line, it goes through a more intense or robust procurement process. When it's below that line, it's still a procurement process, but it's not as intense. And then any property purchases have to go through you guys, right? And then general provisions, Article 8 speaks to our fiscal year, our budget, which must be approved by the board. Bylaws have to be approved by the board. There's training, which we've talked about. Resignations, you guys can resign at any time. You can. And the rest is normal stuff. Anything you're not seeing, anything you want us to look at. The difference between this and the procurement policy is that this sets the large-scale thresholds for how we're going to do our purchases, and then the procurement policy will put it into a little bit more of a fine level of detail so someone can pick that up and understand the process that we're going to have to go through and what we expect to see for procurement and work that's done by the agency. But this has to be happening first before we can do the other.
Do we need anything about hiring the executive director, or was that in there?
It doesn't need to be.
Okay.
I don't feel like it needs to be in there. It's got the role. and how that gets.
Pretty clearly defined.
I mean, that would go through a procurement process based on what your bylaws say for the different levels, or what kind of exemptions we might have available to us
Okay.
as a public agency. Any questions on that?
No questions. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
We will move on to line item 5, consider and possible action, correct? Yes.
4. Yes,
Number
yes,
4,
5.
receive a
Number
report, hold discussion, provide staff feedback regarding the budget, including ongoing capital work and revenue, and approve the fiscal year 25-26 operating budgets for Pete Dressen and Charles Young Housing. Take it away, Ms. Truelove.
I'm actually going to let
Just kidding.
Michael have this one to walk through the budgets, and then ultimately we will be asking you to approve. Again, from what we can tell from going through with the previous administration, we didn't see formal approval of the budget. This should have happened back in, I don't know, May? June? For a July budget, but so we're a little behind the ball, but we're going to get caught up. It's going to be good.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, my name is Michael Roth. I'm the Vice President of Pathways Asset Management for the Housing Authority of the City of Austin, and happy to be here with you this evening to talk through the property budgets for both properties. Before jumping into the full detail on some of this, just a little bit of background. Historically, the fee accountant company, Erlob, has been the one who's produced and helped create a lot of the budgets for the properties. And they did so for this fiscal year as well. But as stated before, we didn't find any evidence that that had been fully ratified by the board at any point in time. So we used that as our starting point, number one, because they had all the historicals that we don't have full access to yet at this moment in time. And number two, because they have a long history and experience with working with this. But with that, though, we did notice a few things that we knew would change, that were based on the previous things related to the previous management company, which were not going to be in place, as well as a few other things that have since that point in time already been approved and already will make changes to the budget. So we wanted to incorporate those in because we already knew about those. So looking at the revenue side, just a reminder that again, we have the differences here that show up between the two programs. For Charles Young, a public housing program, the HUD subsidy comes through the annual contributions contract. That amount is already fixed for already now at this point in time, all the way through the end of calendar year 2026. So the amount of subsidy that we're going to get each month is already a known number. And so the only other source of revenue that there would be the tenant rent, which is just 30% of their adjusted income, and that can vary from month to month. As their income goes up, goes down, as a resident moves out and a new resident moves in, those numbers can really vary tremendously. And then we also take into account vacancy loss. On the public housing side, the advantage of having fixed subsidy is we don't lose any subsidy due to a vacancy, but we do lose any tenant rent during that time of the vacancy. So that's where we budget at a 4% resident vacancy. Thankfully, and we'll see in the monthly reports and property reports, we're performing ahead of that schedule, which just means there's a little bit more money coming into the property. On the Pete Dressen side, it's calculated and functions differently with the HUD multifamily program. The HUD subsidy comes through our contract with the rent schedule that gets approved by HUD with increases every year. And that's one of the things we took into account, that the rent schedule, which goes into effect December 1st, does show an increase, a small increase in rent, which was not calculated and planned for at the time in June because they didn't have that information. So we adjusted slightly for that on the revenue side. And then for this property, we're budgeting at 3% vacancy loss off of the contract rent amount, knowing that, again, that's based on the occupancy rate. And again, the property is performing very close to that number. The operating expenses, Charles Young, we made changes with the new management company here. The couple things that will in particular be impacted on the budget is the management fee. They were charging a higher management fee, which is not abnormal. We have, through the Housing Authority City of Austin, have agreed to a lower amount during the time that we are in this role assisting with Kyle. And so you'll see that is a significantly lower number than would have been originally there with the previous management company. The average maintenance expenses that are accounted for in the budget allows for about $1,300 per unit in expenses. That's a pretty typical amount, especially for a property of the age of Charles Young, built in the early 70s, that we would expect to have that level of maintenance happening throughout the year. And we also then included, make sure that we have the tenant participation funds that we discussed during the resident council section of the meeting tonight, so that the $25 per unit would be accounted for in the budgets. This does not include any of the capital expenses. For public housing, there's a separate capital fund that pays for those capital expenses. And we will have, as mentioned, a further, much more in-depth discussion about that. The previous management company did put together some plans related to capital projects that they wanted to see and start implementing at both properties. And so we do have that information that they had already gathered and what they had started working on, and that will be the beginning and starting point for our discussions on a capital plan for both properties. This is showing a net income or loss of about $56,000, and that would likely be able to be made up by a couple of things. Number one, maintaining the occupancy would increase some of that and reduce some of that deficit. But then secondly, the planning, as we can see through what was in the previous year's budgets as well, was the anticipation of money from Opal Point or other deals to cover that loss at the end of the year. So as we move on to Pete Dressen on the operating expenses side, the average maintenance expenses here were expected to be around $1,600 per unit based on what's budgeted. We also then added in the tenant participation funds, which was not included in the previous version of the budget. And again, capital expenses are not included here. What is different, whereas there's a separate capital fund in the public housing program, in the multifamily program, there's something called a reserve account for replacement. And so that reserve account does exist for the property. That's where a lot of the capital expenses are paid for. So if you're replacing all of your appliances, that's where you would pay for it out of that fund, not out of the operating budget. And with this property, because the rents are higher, and the subsidy, in particular, the subsidy is significantly higher, it allows the property to cash flow at about $99,000 in this budget. And so I think at this point in time, I'm going to stop and just see if you have any particular questions about any of the other line items or any of the other things related to either property's budget. And if we need to, we can pull up the budgets on the screen. I think the link might be there. Yep. Yes, thank you.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One, if we're expecting an increase in December for rent, have the tenants been notified?
So it will not impact the residents at all. The increase
Okay.
becomes essentially additional subsidy from HUD.
Got it.
So the way the Pete Dressen property works is it's very much like private rental market in which there's actual contract rent. There is no actual contract rent in the public housing program. The contract rent, if it was $800 this year, maybe it goes up to $850, but the resident still pays 30% of their income. So if 30% of their income is only $200, that subsidy went from $600 to $650. It does not impact the resident at all.
Okay, got it. And then second question is, I guess in my mind, I had the monthly income annualized, not it being, I might have just used the word monthly there, but I was thinking it was averaged annually, what their annual income was, not monthly income. How do they go about reporting that? And then how do we really project our budget if that is scheduled to change every month?
So on the Pete Dressen side, the impact on budget is zero, because if a resident's portion goes higher or lower, it just means HUD's portion goes higher or lower.
Okay.
So for that property, it's very easy and very straightforward. For the public housing program, you're hitting on the very real life challenge to every public housing property in the country is just that.
Okay.
Your subsidy is fixed, but your tenant rent portion can go up or down, and you don't have control over that in the very real sense. So residents are allowed to come in and say, hey, I lost my job, or I was getting a Social Security benefit that I'm no longer getting. And based on whatever they're able to when we document that, then yes, their rent portion does go down based on that. And the overall revenue of the property goes down. You do our best looking over time and over years to project as close as you can.
Okay, that was gonna be my third question then, is like, are we able to project some of the variance there?
To a certain degree,
Okay.
there's it is much more variable and volatile when you have a really small property like this. When you only have 21 units, 2 units, that's 10% of your property. And if two families get jobs with huge income or lose jobs that had a fairly sizable income, that can have a real impact on the overall property budget. And there's very little control over that. Larger properties are either much more easily able to absorb that.
Thanks. That's all I
Yeah.
have.
I only had one question, but you answered it. I was just going to ask what was the plan to address the deficit and then ensure the long-term financial health and solvency of the public housing. But you said maintaining occupancy, and then, of course,
Yeah.
the anticipated property tax exemption payment in December would cover
Yeah,
it.
there's once that money comes in, there's flexibility that's available on the financial side to how to use that. And I'm, not having spoken with the staff at ERLAB in full detail about that, but just looking at the last couple of years, that's what they did, and that's how they were making up for that deficit. So it would be the recommendation of staff and recommendation to approve these budgets for the fiscal year running through June 30th of 2026.
Okay, great. Do we put it forward to okay. So I move that we take a vote on whether we should approve the budget as requested for the fiscal year of 2026. And we just do ayes, nays. Okay.
Need a second.
Oh, I second that motion.
Okay, thanks. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we are approving it as presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we are ready to move on to number 5. Yes, great. So this will be receiving a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff feedback regarding the key performance indicator report, which includes data on occupancy, rent collection, work order completion, and HUD compliance, and approve the purchase of a model emissions and continued occupancy policy with digital revision service from Nan McKay and Associates. And is this going to be you as well,
It's
Mr.
going
Ruff?
to be me as well, I do believe.
Excellent,
Yep.
thank you.
So it is it's my intent that during the time that we're involved with providing support to the Kyle Housing Authority, that every month we would provide this report to you so that you can see how the property is performing and what that looks like at this point in time. So these are the standard key performance indicators that most housing, not just subsidized housing, is measured by. What's your occupancy and vacancy rate? What's your rent collection going on? What's happening with work orders? Because those all reflect the health of the property, both financially, but also the perception of residents. If work orders aren't getting done, that creates frustration and irritation, and that leads people to say, hey, maybe I want to go live somewhere else, which affects vacancy. It all impacts on each other. So looking at the occupancy for Charles Young, again, we were living in this world of 2 different programs, and they calculate things differently, which is kind of frustrating. It feels like occupancy should be a standard way of measuring that, but it's not. For Charles Young, they're looking at 1 day a month is all that matters as far as HUD is concerned on occupancy. And that is, the last day of the month, how many units are occupied, how many units are not occupied. And so based on that, the way they're looking at it, for the month of October, we were 100% occupied on the last day of the month. And year to date, we were over 96% occupied, 96.4% occupied. Pete Dressen, Multifamily World, they look at it on a per day basis. How many days did we have units occupied? And so when you're looking at that, at the end of October, for the month of October, we were a little over 95% occupied, and year to date, we're over 96%, almost 96.4% occupied. That also then allows us to calculate a vacancy loss, which is just how much rent did we not collect simply because the unit was vacant. And so year to date, we've lost about a little over 3% of our revenue due to vacancy. And keep in mind, with a property with 31 units, a single unit being vacant is almost 3% of your revenue right there. So that's the challenge at a small property.
Do you feel like that aligns pretty closely to what you would see in Austin as well?
So, on the occupancy side, we're always pushing for 98% occupancy. That's always the goal. But again, that's a challenge with small properties. A single vacancy can really hurt you. Doesn't mean that that's still not the goal for the calendar year, but anytime you have a vacancy, you're not going to hit it for that month. But I think it should be the goal is to hit that, because we know, first and foremost, that there is a huge need for affordable housing. We don't want units just sitting empty and vacant. The goal is to house people. That's what we do. And so 98% is the goal that we're constantly shooting for. 97% is still very, very good, and I think we're really close to that right now.
Question on that. So it's my understanding there's a waiting list to get into both of these housing facilities. Is the 3% then just the interim of us filling out the paperwork and getting them into the housing unit?
It's more likely, and in most cases, it's more about making the repairs necessary before we can even move someone in. And that can really vary from unit to unit.
Okay.
And especially with older units, if you start getting into perhaps a need to replace flooring, well, that's going to take you a little bit of time to get that done. Do we need to replace an appliance? So we got to get out and purchase that appliance and get that in. So it really, that usually tends to be the largest bulk of time. And during that time, the staff can be working on processing that next family on the waiting list, so that you usually try to meet it up so that when the unit's actually ready to be occupied, someone's already approved and ready to move in. From there, then you're just negotiating dates on, what's going on in that family's personal life to be able to, execute and move that quickly.
Well, how often do we find ourselves in a situation where I guess in my mind, if the flooring is bad, shouldn't it be replaced before the next family? Like, should we really be running into that problem if the flooring is bad, that it's not ready to go once a new family is ready to come in?
So the number of things can happen with that. When an apartment is fully occupied, you sometimes can't necessarily see everything because of furniture and everything else. It's not always as readily apparent and obvious on certain things like flooring. And even when we get into a situation where we say, hey, this flooring is starting to get old, it's getting to its end of useful life, but we're not quite there yet. Moving of an occupied unit with all the family's belongings out, putting them in a hotel for whatever length of time to do that, sometimes there isn't the financial ability to do that all the time as well. Now, there are times when it's absolutely necessary. If there's reason for it where it's not safe, then you have no choice but to do those very things. But I think most of the time we're finding it's not that it wasn't safe, it's just now when it's empty is the opportunity to more easily and more feasibly do it, more quickly do it, without really negatively impacting the lives of families and kids.
Okay, thank you.
Just curious, do you happen to know if they have like a replacement cycle in their leases? I know when I lived in an apartment, it was like if you live here at least so many years, they'll come in and replace the floor whether I'm leaving or not. Is there anything
So
in there?
for Pete Dressen, I can say absolutely not, because they're using the HUD model lease as it's the exact same lease we use, and I know it's not in that lease.
Okay.
And I would be very, very surprised if it's in the Charles Young lease.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. On the rent collection side, for Charles Young, for October, 92% at the end of the month, and then year-to-date, 96. It's not surprising to have the current month be a little bit low. There are always a few families that, when life happens, they're late on rent, and most of the time that gets caught up by the end of the next month, so that's not surprising. Oh, sorry. I didn't know it was in there. My fault. On the Peach Restaurant side, it was a little bit lower on the rent collection. It was only at 84% for the month of October, but again, we see that year-to-date they're at 96%, so I'm not real concerned by that number at this point in time. And on work orders, this is where we're seeing we will likely see the most dramatic change over time going forward. Is historically work orders were tracked manually, and so now we are shifting to tracking that through our software system. And so some of these numbers for the first couple of months are not necessarily real precise numbers on this, but to say what we know of outstanding work orders, I think is accurate, and being able to say that at the end of October for Peach Restaurant, all the work orders that we were aware of and that had been called in had been done. That's not to say that everything was fixed and perfect. It's just to say that what had been called in and reported had been worked on and been addressed. And as we now move into more digital tracking of that, we'll have much more precise numbers on this going forward. Annual reexaminations, again, we are current on all of our annual reexaminations of both properties. That's the requirement for them to submit and go through the full income re-verification. There's a little asterisk on the slide for each of these because for both properties, there's been some challenges with uploading some of this information into the HUD systems, which is on the public housing side a software issue, and we're working with the software company on resolving that software issue. On the Peach Restaurant side, we have all the information uploaded. It's the current month that, in part due to the shutdown, we don't have everything fully uploaded, but that's an easy fix that we will get taken care of. And for this we will keep this on the report every month, but this part won't change when we start getting down to the public housing, what's called the FOS score, the Public Housing Assessment System, and then for the Peach Restaurant when we get into the management occupancy review. But if you go back real quick to the Charles Young, this is how the public housing program, how HUD has scored the property. So they do 4 categories. There's a physical assessment, a financial assessment, a management assessment, and a capital fund assessment. And based on all of that, when you combine it together, the property scores a 76 out of 100. So physically, based on their last physical inspection, they got 36 of the 40 points. That means they scored a 90 on their physical inspection, which is a good score. It means HUD's not going to come back and look for 3 years. On the financial assessment, scoring 25 out of 25, we got all the points. That should give some confidence too, knowing that finances were being managed correctly. The management system and score is where we saw the biggest challenge. And looking back historically, what information I was able to gather around this, they lost the 15 of the 25 points primarily due to occupancy. At a period of time, if you get below 90% occupancy, you lose 10 points. And thinking of a property of 20 units, 2 vacant units throughout the year, you're below 90%, you've lost 10 points on your management score. A real challenge for a small property. But having said that, it's also a great property that really shouldn't constantly have 2 vacant units throughout the entire year. And so this score was taken a couple of years ago. This was not based on current data. So I feel we're doing much better than this right now, and we would score higher than this if we were actually assessed on this right now. And the capital fund, it was exactly the same issue because half of the capital fund points are tied to occupancy. So with the occupancy low, we lost 5 points there as well. So this is we'll stay up there until we go through our next full assessment of this through HUD. and we'll update it at that point in time. But it kind of gives you a snapshot picture of where we are in the eyes of HUD on Charles Young.
And when do they do the assessments? Like how often?
So the physical assessment will be every 3 years as long as they keep scoring 90 or above. The financial assessment is done annually. The management is done usually annually, but at a different time of year. And the capital fund is also done annually. So it doesn't all come in at the same time.
Okay, thanks.
And for Pete Dressen, they go through what's called a management occupancy review. And this is done by the Southwest Housing Compliance Corporation. And they conducted the MOR last July of 2024. And you'll see that in all the different categories, the property scored satisfactory or above average. And with an overall scoring and rating of satisfactory, scoring of 77. So it's not exactly equivalent to the 76 on Charles Young. It's not like they're exactly equivalent, but because they come to those numbers in very different ways. But you can see here the different categories that they looked at and how, the areas of greatest strength were the follow-up on previous inspections, that they were working on anything that was called out in previous inspections, and the tenant management relations, which I think is a good thing. We want to see that being a high score as well. So the fact that both of those are above average is good for the property. But overall, the property is scoring satisfactory, which means we're not on anybody's radar, we're not on anybody's watch list, or anything of that nature. But we're at least meeting the basic standards of the property. Okay. So any questions on those reports? We won't necessarily go into the full detail on those last section every month, but I do want to keep you informed on what's going on with the operations. Then, as mentioned earlier, we do have the public housing policy issue to discuss. The Pete Dressen property has a very current tenant selection plan and house rules and EIV policy. All of their policies are very current, having been updated earlier this year through a third-party consultant who is a very well-known and very reputable consultant in the industry. So I have a very high confidence level in the quality of the policy documents that are used to operate at Pete Dressen. On Charles Young, there's a requirement to have an admissions and continued occupancy policy, which was not currently in place. So what we have here is the opportunity to work through another known consulting organization within the national world of public housing, Nan McKay & Associates. And they offer a service where you can purchase a standardized admissions and continued occupancy policy, and then go through and add any updates that were specific to your property, as long as it's within the range of acceptable for HUD requirements. And they will offer this digital version only at $1,079, that you can have that, and then it's just yours to keep updating. Or you can purchase their revision service, where as HUD makes its changes in policy, they will send out those revisions to you to automatically add and include in your next version of the ACOP that you bring to the board for approval. So it would be the recommendation to go ahead and purchase not just the digital version, but then also the service to allow the property to stay current throughout the years.
Is this different than whoever worked on the Dressen policy?
It is a different agency, which makes sense because Nan McKay is really the gold standard in the public housing and housing choice voucher world, but not so much in the multifamily project-based rental assistance world. Whereas, Jenny De Silva and her organization, she is one of the leading national consultants in the PBRA world. So I do feel that we're kind of getting the best of both.
Great. All right, so we need to make a motion to approve or to make a decision on digital only or digital with revision. Is that correct?
Is
Correct.
the revision service how long do we have revision access?
So what's not on here is and I don't know off the top of my head what the renewal rate of the revision. It's not the full $1,300 every year. It is a lower amount for the renewal, but for the first year, it's the full ACOP plus the revision service. So we'd have to come back next year to get approval for that to continue the revision service at that point in time.
And do they do it from the year we get into the agreement with them, or is it?
From the start of when we start the contract with them.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be 1 year from that point in time. And they, as I said, as HUD issues different policies, which they can come out at any point in time. I mean, I would expect that as the government shutdown ends, that there are about 3 or 4 that we've heard may be coming, and so I wouldn't be surprised if very quickly we see some of those in the not too distant future. But this would allow us to stay current throughout the year.
Okay. So do we make a motion to approve the recommendation? Is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So I put before us that we vote on authorizing the purchase of the digital ACOP with digital revision service. Can I have a second?
I second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nay? All right, approved. Thank you so much.
And then, so just so you know, next steps would be that once we actually receive that and get that copy from them, we'll have to go through and implement various changes, or not too much changes, but exactly how we're going to implement some of these policies at our location. There'll be spaces throughout the ACOP for us to do that. There is a requirement for a public comment period for that, so we will put that out for public comment, and then we'll also come back before the board for full approval by the Board of Commissioners. So that timeline will kind of play out depending on when we actually get the copy.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, then that concludes our agenda items. So it is 7:27. I move to adjourn.